3 men could have escaped the fire by simply bowing their heads. They chose to burn, and the soldiers who pushed them toward the furnace died instantly, melted by the same heat that, once they were inside, did not scorch a single hair on them. That's the first absurdity of this story, and it's not even the biggest yet. Stop on that contradiction, because everything is hidden right there. The question almost no one dares to ask is not why Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego did not burn. It's why, with the exit just one gesture away, they chose to go in anyway. And the answer is in 3 words they spoke in Aramaic, standing before the king, seconds before they were bound. 3 words that almost every translation softens, and that hold the true reason those young men ended up inside the fire. Stay. Because we're going to read those words just as they sound in the original language. We're going to step with you into that furnace, and you're going to discover that the most disturbing detail of the whole chapter is not the fire. It's the 4th man who appeared when only 3 had gone in. And if it's your first time here, welcome to the family. Subscribe so you don't miss what's coming. I'm not asking you to stay by force. If in a couple of minutes this adds nothing to you, you leave with no hard feelings. But if it resonates, leave your like there, in good faith, because it's the only thing that helps this message reach someone else who needs it today. Let's start at the beginning, because to understand why 3 young men preferred to burn alive rather than bow, first you have to understand what had been stolen from them. Long before the fire, long before the golden statue, there was a caravan of prisoners walking toward the east. Jerusalem had fallen. The army of Babylon had leveled the city, plundered the temple, and carried off the best of the Jewish nobility. Not the weakest, the opposite. The most intelligent, healthiest, most promising young men, the ones with a future. Among them went 4 teenagers. One was named Daniel. The other 3 were named Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. Notice something the Hebrew guards with enormous care, because that's where the real battle of this account begins. Those 3 names were not empty sounds. They were declarations. In the language of Israel, a name carried the soul of an entire family, told a story, enclosed a faith. Hananiah means Yahweh has been gracious. The sacred name, hidden in the final syllable like a signature. Mishael means a question hurled at heaven. Who is like God? And Azariah means Yahweh is my help. 3 boys, and in their 3 names 3 times the name of the God of Israel. They wore it. They heard it every time someone called them to the table. And that was exactly what Babylon decided to erase. Because when they were taken to the palace, the chief of the king's officials changed their names. It was not an administrative formality. It was a spiritual surgery. From Hananiah, they tore out Yahweh and rebaptized him Shadrach. From Mishael, they tore out God and called him Meshach. And to Azariah, listen closely, they gave the name Abednego, which in Aramaic means servant of Nego. And Nego, or Nabu, was one of the gods of Babylon, the god of wisdom and of writing. Do you see it? They didn't just take the Most High out of their mouths. They replaced him with a foreign god. The young man, whose name was Yahweh is my help, was now forced to answer every day of his life to a name that meant slave of a Babylonian idol. Every time someone called him, they were pronouncing a small blasphemy over him. That's the oldest and most sophisticated way of erasing a people. You don't always begin with chains. Sometimes you begin with a new name, a new food, a new language, a new education, until the captive no longer remembers whose he was. Babylon did not want to kill these young men. It wanted to convert them. It wanted to Babylonize their hearts until the conversion was so complete that they wouldn't even notice it. But there was a problem. And it had already shown signs, because this was not the first time these young men had drawn a line in the ground. Long before the furnace, when they had just arrived at the palace, the book tells us they were served the food and wine of the royal table. an enormous privilege for a prisoner, and the four refused. They asked with all respect to eat only vegetables and water, so as not to defile themselves with that table. A small gesture, almost invisible. No one would have gone to the fire over some vegetables, and yet there was already the complete pattern of their character. They accepted the language of Babylon. They accepted the studies of Babylon. They accepted even the names of Babylon. But at the point where loyalty to God began, exactly there, they put up a wall. They were flexible in everything except in the one thing that is not negotiable. For years on the surface, everything went well. The three rose. They mastered the language, the literature, the administration of the empire. They came to be officials over the affairs of the province of Babylon. From the outside, they looked like three perfectly integrated young men with Babylonian names, loyally serving a foreign king, indistinguishable from any other bureaucrat of the palace. And yet, there was something no new name could touch, and that something was about to come to light on a plain before a colossal statue. The man who ordered that statue built was named Nebuchadnezzar, and it's worth knowing who he really was, because the movies have turned him into a caricature of a shouting tyrant. His name in Akkadian, the language of Babylon, was Nabu-Kuduri-Usur. It means something like, "May the god Nabu protect my heir." Again, that god Nabu embedded even in the monarch's name. This king was not an improvised despot. He was probably the most ambitious builder in all of Mesopotamian antiquity. He rebuilt Babylon, brick by brick, until he made it the most impressive city in the known world. The colossal walls, the great gate dedicated to the goddess Ishtar covered in blue tiles, the step temples that seemed to touch the sky. Tradition even attributes to him some hanging gardens that were counted among the wonders of the ancient world. He was a man accustomed to having reality obey him. He diverted rivers. He raised mountains of brick, and one day he decided to raise an image. And here there's a connection most people have never heard, and that gives this whole story a chilling depth, because this was not the first statue in Nebuchadnezzar's life. In an earlier chapter, this same king had had a dream that terrified him, and Daniel had interpreted it for him. In the dream, there appeared a great statue made of several metals. The head was of pure gold, the chest and arms of silver, the belly of bronze, the legs of iron, and the feet of iron mixed with clay. Daniel explained its meaning to the king without flattering him. "You, O king, are that head of gold, but after you another kingdom will come, inferior, and then another and another. Your empire, however glorious it may be, is going to pass away. You are not eternal. You are only the head, and even the head one day falls." Now think about the statue on the plain of Dura, all of gold, not the head of gold and the rest inferior metals as in the dream. No, all of it, from top to bottom, gold and nothing but gold. There's something deeply defiant in that image. It's as if Nebuchadnezzar were answering God, as if he were saying, "You showed me an empire that begins in gold and ends in clay, an empire that passes away. Well, I'm going to build one that is entirely gold, completely gold, gold forever. I am not going to be only the head. I am going to be the whole statue, and I'm going to force the world to kneel before it." The statue of Dura can be read as the pride of a man trying to correct the prophecy of God with hammer blows of gold. The account gives us the measurements, and they're measurements that leave you thinking. 60 cubits high, 6 cubits wide. If you translate it into our units, we're talking about a structure almost 90 feet tall, like a 9-story building, entirely covered in gold, blazing with brightness under the desert sun. Now, stop on the proportion, 60 high by 6 wide, 10 times taller than it was wide. No human body has that shape. A real person is barely 3 or 4 times taller than wide, not 10. So, in all probability, that image was not a realistic standing human figure. The most reasonable thing is to think it stood on a very tall pedestal, a kind of obelisk or column crowned by the figure, so that the whole thing reached that impossible height, and no one holds that it was solid gold, because that would have required a simply absurd amount of metal. As was the custom throughout the ancient East, it most likely had a core of wood or metal covered with thin sheets of gold. The effect, in any case, was the same, a golden mountain visible for miles around. And where did he raise it? The narration says on the plain of Dura in the province of Babylon. The exact location is debated today among the specialists. The word Dura is related to a term that means wall or walled enclosure, and it appears in several place names throughout the region, so archaeologists juggle more than one candidate with no definitive certainty. What we do know is what that plain was for that day. To gather an entire empire in a single place and bring it to its knees at the same time, because the statue was not art, it was a test of loyalty disguised as a religious ceremony. Imagine the scene, and I say imagine because the account gives us the skeleton and we carefully put the flesh on it. An immense esplanade under a white sun, dust in the air, tens of thousands of people, governors, magistrates, captains, treasurers, judges, counselors, officials from every corner of the empire, summoned by express order of the sovereign, all lined up before that golden thing that throws the light back into their faces and forces them to squint. And next to the statue, another structure, lower, darker, smoke pours from its mouth. It's a furnace. No one in that crowd needs to be told what that smoking structure is there for. And then a man steps forward. The account calls him the herald and uses for him a word, karos, which is precisely one of the terms in this chapter that spark debate about its origin, because it sounds suspiciously similar to Greek words. And we're going to talk about that in a second, because it's one of the most fascinating things in the whole book. The herald shouts with all his strength an order directed at all peoples, nations, and tongues. The order is simple and it is terrible. The instant they hear the music sound, everyone, absolutely everyone, must prostrate themselves on the ground and worship the golden image. And whoever does not bow, whoever remains standing, will be thrown that very moment into the furnace of blazing fire. Music or death, that was the choice offered to an empire. Now then, we arrive at one of the most extraordinary details in the whole Hebrew Bible, a detail hidden in the list of musical instruments that would sound on that plain. Pay very close attention, because here there's an enigma that has pitted scholars against one another for more than a century. The list enumerates the instruments that would give the signal, the horn, the flute, and then several instruments whose names, in the original Aramaic, are words of a clearly foreign appearance. One is transcribed kaitros, and it's practically the Greek word kithara, from which come our sithara and also guitar. Another is psalterin, which reproduces the Greek word psalterion, the psaltery, and a third, symponia, which is the Greek word symphonia, from which we get symphony. Why does this matter so much? Here's the problem. At the end of the 19th century, a British scholar named Samuel Rolles Driver formulated an argument that shook biblical studies. Driver said, in a sentence that became famous, that the Greek demands, the Hebrew supports, and the Aramaic permits a date later than the conquest of Alexander the Great, in the year 332 before Christ. In other words, according to him, the mere presence of those Greek words in the list would prove that the book of Daniel could not have been written in the time of Nebuchadnezzar, in the 6th century before Christ, but centuries later when the Greeks already dominated the region. It was, the critics said, a devastating proof against the antiquity of the book. And for decades, that argument seemed unbeatable, except that the history of scholarship rarely stays still, because in the last 50 years the wind changed direction. More and more scholars have shown that the Greeks did not arrive in the East with Alexander. They arrived much earlier. There were Greek merchants, there were Greek mercenaries, there was Greek pottery circulating throughout the Near East already in the 7th and 6th centuries before Christ. We know that Greek soldiers served in the armies of the region in that era, fighting as paid troops far from their homeland, and the names of musical instruments are precisely the kind of word that travels first, before any army, in the hands of merchants, of travelers, and of wandering musicians. Music crosses borders before swords do. And there's more. And this is the truly surprising part. Recent linguistic research has examined the exact form of those words within the Aramaic of Daniel, and has noticed a revealing detail. They preserve features of ancient Greek dialects, and not of the Attic Greek that prevailed later with the Hellenism of Alexander. That is, the very form of the words points to an early borrowing, not a late one. What for a century was used as the strongest proof against the antiquity of Daniel is today, for several specialists, an argument that points in exactly the opposite direction. Some have even proposed that they are not even established loanwords in the language, but something more subtle, an author who mixed languages, who slipped loose Greek words into his Aramaic because both he and his audience moved among several languages at once, as happens in any great imperial city. I'm not going to tell you that this closes the debate, because that would be dishonest of me. The discussion about the date of Daniel remains open and is genuinely complex, with serious arguments on several sides. But I can tell you this with confidence: the idea that those few Greek words, by themselves, prove a late date, that idea no longer holds up as it once did. The text turned out to be far more resistant than its critics believed 100 years ago. And that, in itself, is already a small lesson in humility for all of us who believe we have the last word on an ancient book. And while we discuss linguistics, over there on the plain, the music is about to sound. The horn sounds, the flute sounds, the cithara, the psaltery, the symphony sound. And like a single field of wheat bending before a gust of wind, tens of thousands of people drop to their knees and press their foreheads against the dust. The entire empire prostrate all at once before the gold. And think for a second about the psychological machinery of that instant. When everyone around you kneels at the same time, the pressure to imitate them is almost physical. There's an invisible force in the crowd that drags the individual, that whispers to him that resisting is ridiculous, that it's only a gesture, that no one will find out, that there will be time to repent in private. The music, the mass, the fear of the fire, everything pushed in the same direction. To bow was the natural thing, the reasonable thing, what anyone who wants to stay alive does. And yet, in the middle of that sea of bent backs, 3 points remained standing. 3 upright figures in an ocean of knees. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego did not move. And believe me, in a prostrate crowd, 3 people standing do not go unnoticed. They are the most visible thing in the world. They were 3 towers in a flattened field. How do you think the empire reacted to those 3 towers? Because here the story takes a turn almost no one notices, and it has to do with who accused them, and above all, why. The narration says that certain men, whom it calls Chaldeans, approached the king and denounced the Jews, and the way they do it reveals a great deal. They did not run alarmed, indignant at the offense to the state religion. They went with cold calculation. First, they reminded Nebuchadnezzar of his own decree, word for word, like someone setting a trap for the king, using his own rules so that afterward he couldn't back down. And only then did they drop the name of the accused. And here is the detail that changes the flavor of the whole scene. They said, and I repeat the sense of their words, "There are certain Jews whom you set over the affairs of the province of Babylon, who pay no attention to you, O king." Did you hear it? Whom you set. They were rubbing in the king's face that those rebels were his own protégés. Foreigners, Jews, exiles from a defeated people, promoted to posts of power above the native Babylonians. This was not simply religious zeal, it was political envy disguised as piety. They were resentful officials who saw a golden opportunity to bring down 3 foreigners who had passed over them in the hierarchy of the empire. And that's one of the most human and darkest truths in the whole account. Many times, the persecution that dresses itself as a defense of the sacred is nothing more than ambition looking for a noble excuse. The accusers of these 3 young men did not want to honor any god. They wanted a promotion, and they were willing to burn 3 people to get it. The trap worked to perfection. Nebuchadnezzar, the man who diverted rivers, exploded. The account says he was filled with rage and fury. And it's worth understanding the king's wound well, because it was not only pride. It was not merely that 3 subjects had disobeyed an order. It was that 3 men whom he, personally, had raised from nothing, whom he had educated, fed, promoted, and rewarded, were humiliating him in public before his entire empire gathered in a single place. For an absolute monarch, this was not simple disobedience. It was treason, and it was an affront that cast doubt on his authority before thousands of witnesses. And yet he did something curious. Before killing them, he offered them a second chance. He had them brought into his presence, and when he had them standing before him, he asked whether what was being said was true, and then he opened an escape door for them. He told them the music would sound once more, and that if this time they prostrated themselves, everything would be forgiven and forgotten. But then he closed that door with a sentence that was, deep down, a challenge hurled directly against heaven. He asked them with contempt what God was capable of delivering them from his hands. That question was not for the young men, it was for their God. Nebuchadnezzar had just challenged the God of Israel to a duel of power in public before the whole world, and the answer of the 3 is one of the highest moments in all of Scripture. Listen to it with the closest attention, because here is the heart of everything I promised you at the beginning. They told the king they did not even need to answer him on that matter. And then they declared something like this: "If you throw us into the fire, the God whom we serve is able to deliver us from the furnace of blazing fire, and from your hand he will deliver us, O king." Up to there, it sounds like a triumphant declaration of faith. It sounds like, "Don't worry, God is going to rescue us." And if the story ended at that sentence, it would be just a nice story of optimistic confidence. Except it doesn't end there, because the next thing they said are the 3 most important words in the whole chapter. In the original Aramaic, they are "we hen la," and they mean simply, "but if not, but if not." Stop on those 3 words. The complete declaration was in essence, our God is able to deliver us, and if he does, blessed be he. But if he does not, O king, let it be absolutely clear to you all the same. We will not serve your gods, nor worship the golden statue you have raised. Do you realize what those 3 young men just did? They just stripped their obedience of all condition, all insurance, all safety net. They did not say, "We will obey God because we know he will save us." They said, "We will obey God even if he lets us burn." They had no guarantee. They had received no dream that morning. No angel had whispered in their ear that everything would turn out fine. They were completely in the dark about their own immediate future. And even so, they chose. And notice the very fine theology of what they said, because it's easy to overlook. They are not doubting the power of God. They affirm forcefully that he can save them. What they do is something far more mature and far rarer. They separate the power of God from the obligation of God. They acknowledge that heaven is capable of rescuing them, and at the same time, they acknowledge that heaven does not owe them that rescue, that God remains worthy of obedience even if he chooses not to intervene. That is not weak faith. That is the highest form of faith there is, the faith that worships God for who he is and not for what he hands over. That and no other is the true reason they ended up inside the fire. They were not thrown in because they had a signed divine insurance policy. They were thrown in because they voluntarily renounced that insurance, because they put their faithfulness above their own survival, and they said it to the most powerful monarch on earth's face, without lowering their eyes. And here an uncomfortable mirror is in order. Most of us, if we're honest, serve God with a silent calculation underneath. We serve Him while things go well for us, while there's health, while there's work, while prayer seems to function and return results. It's a conditioned faith, a faith with clauses. These three young men cut that kind of negotiated faith off at the root, and that interior decision was, in reality, far more radical than the miracle that came afterward. Because the miracle, God did it in an instant. But the decision to burn, they made it, alone, with no visible help, without knowing the end of the story. And I truly want to read you, so answer me one thing below in the comments. If it were you standing before that furnace with no guarantee of coming out alive, would that, but if not, have come out of you? Be honest with yourself. That same courage, the courage of one who prefers to die rather than betray what he believes, would reappear centuries later in countless men and women who faced their own fires with no guarantee of rescue. These three, standing on the plain of Dura, were like the first in a long line that crosses all of history. When the king heard that answer, he completely lost control of himself, and the account records here a physical detail worth pure gold. It says that Nebuchadnezzar's countenance was altered, that his face was transformed by rage. The man who controlled everything had just crashed head-on into three people who no longer feared his worst threat. And there's nothing that infuriates a tyrant more than discovering that his most fearsome weapon, death, has stopped working on someone. If you no longer fear death, the tyrant is left with nothing to bend you with. So he ordered the fire heated, and he did not simply ask that it be heated. He asked for something very specific and very revealing. The Aramaic says, had Shiva, literally 7 times. 7 times more than the furnace was usually heated. Now, don't take that number as the reading of a precision thermometer. In the Semitic world, 7 was the number of totality, of the complete, of the absolute, of the perfect. 7 times hotter is the ancient way of saying, as hot as is humanly possible, take it to the extreme, with no limit. It was, in reality, the king's uncontrolled fury translated directly into temperature. An order that, without his knowing it, would only serve to make the miracle more impossible, and therefore more undeniable. And it's worth understanding what kind of structure that furnace was, because it was not a campfire or a chimney. Babylon was a civilization built literally on the brick. They did not have abundant stone like Egypt. They raised their entire city, their walls, their temples, and their palaces with millions and millions of mud bricks, many of them fired in enormous kilns to harden them until they were almost eternal. Archaeologists have studied that technology in detail. They were tall structures with a vertical draft, with an opening at the top through which the material was loaded and through which the smoke escaped, and a door or mouth lower down on the side. That architecture perfectly explains two things in the account that many overlook. It explains how the king, later, could lean in and look inside from the side, at ground level. And it explains how someone could be thrown from up high into a chamber that was, in practice, a hell of incandescent walls glowing orange. The order came to bind them, and the narration pauses with an almost cinematic precision to describe that they bound them fully clothed, with their mantles, their tunics, their hose, their turbans, all their clothing on their bodies. Why this apparently minor detail? Because what is going to happen with that clothing in a few minutes will be a central piece of the miracle. Keep it in mind. The strongest men of Nebuchadnezzar's army seized the 3 bound young men and carried them up toward the mouth of the furnace. And here occurs the first miracle, the one almost no one highlights, because it gets eclipsed by what comes afterward. The narration says that since the king's order was urgent and the structure had been overheated beyond the impossible, the blast of flame that escaped through the mouth killed on the spot the soldiers who were carrying up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Stop on the brutal irony of that sentence. The executioners died. The condemned did not. The very fire that was supposed to consume the victims devoured the executioners. At the exact instant, the 3 were falling inside, bound, defenseless. The heat had already shown what it was capable of, killing strong, armed men who were outside standing next to the door, and that has a very important narrative function. No one, absolutely no one among the thousands of witnesses could doubt afterward that that furnace killed. It had just killed, before everyone, its own soldiers. Any rational explanation was closed in advance. What was about to happen would have no logical way out. And then the 3 young men, bound hand and foot, fell to the bottom of the furnace of blazing fire. In Aramaic, that fire has a name worth hearing slowly. They call it Atun Nura Yakita. Atun is the furnace. Nura is the fire, a word kin to the fire that burns in so many sacred passages, the same fire of the theophanies. And Yakita means blazing, lit, scorching, the furnace fire that scorches, the most certain and most definitive death sentence that existed in all that empire. 3 bound bodies, the bottom of a furnace at maximum temperature. Physics is physics. The story, in any other case in the world, would end with 3 piles of ash and a foul smell in the air. But Nebuchadnezzar leaped up from his throne. The account paints him as a man astonished, startled, getting to his feet all at once, unable to believe what he was seeing. And he asked his counselors a question that betrays what his eyes refused to accept. He asked them, "Did we not throw 3 men bound into the fire?" And they confirmed it to him. "That's right, O king, there were 3. And then he pronounced the sentence that has echoed for 25 centuries. "Well, I see 4 men loose walking in the midst of the fire, suffering no harm, and the appearance of the 4th is like a son of the gods." 4. 3 had gone in, 4 were walking. They had been thrown in bound. Loose, they strolled calmly. And beside them a 4th figure the king could not identify. Now we have to be very careful and very honest with what follows, because about this 4th character all kinds of things have been said over the centuries, and not everything that's said is really in the sacred text. Notice first who is speaking. It's Nebuchadnezzar, a polytheistic king, a worshipper of Marduk, of Nabu, of the whole court of gods of Babylon. When he says the 4th looks like a son of the gods, he's using his own pagan category, his own religious dictionary. In Aramaic, it's Ba Elahin. Ba is son, the same root that appears throughout the region to say son of. And Elahin is a plural that can be translated gods. The monarch is describing what he sees with the only spiritual vocabulary he knows. For him, that luminous being walking among the flames can only be a divine being, a son of the gods, because his pagan mind has no other box to put it in. But here's the key almost everyone skips over in their enthusiasm. A few verses later, Nebuchadnezzar himself corrects his description. When the 3 come out unharmed and he blesses their God, he says that this God sent his angel and delivered his servants. The word he uses this time in Aramaic is malakeh, his angel, his messenger. The king goes from a son of the gods, which was his confused pagan reading, to his angel, which is a far more precise recognition. So, what was the 4th man? The account itself, through the mouth of the corrected king, gives us the most direct and most literal answer: an angel, a messenger sent by the God of Israel. That is the reading the narration itself offers, with no embellishment. Now then, throughout history, other readings have arisen. and it's worth knowing them honestly. A good part of ancient Jewish tradition understood that figure precisely as an angel, and the Talmud went so far as to give him a name. It identifies him with the archangel Gabriel, presented there as the angel of fire, sent to cool from within and to rescue the righteous from the flames. On the other hand, many Christian readers went further and saw in that fourth character an appearance of the Son of God before his incarnation, a kind of foretaste of Christ walking in the midst of the fire alongside his own. It's an ancient reading, beautiful and very dear to millions of believers, and it has its own theological logic. But it's an interpretation, not a literal affirmation of the account. And honesty requires us to distinguish the two things clearly. The text says, "his angel." Christian devotion afterward saw in that angel a greater face. You can embrace that reading with all your heart, but it's always good to know exactly where what is written ends and where what we interpret about what is written begins. That distinction does not weaken faith. It makes it honest. What the text does affirm without the slightest ambiguity is this: in the worst place imaginable, in the center of a forge designed to erase human bodies from the world, the three young men were not alone. They had gone in blind, with no guarantee, ready to die. And they discovered, once inside, that faithfulness offered in the midst of darkness has company. That the "but if not" did not lead them to a solitary death, but to a stroll. Listen closely, to a calm stroll in the midst of the fire, with a fourth presence walking at their side like one more friend, and the only thing the flames managed to burn were their bonds. They went in bound hand and foot. They were walking loose and free. The only thing that burned in that hell were the ropes that held them prisoner. The fire, which could not touch their skin, did loosen their chains. There's something almost poetic in that detail, and it's not my invention. It's in the account itself. The very fire the empire used to subdue them ended up being, ironically, the only thing that truly freed them. What the king sent to destroy, God used to release. Nebuchadnezzar approached the mouth of the forge. The man who minutes before had defied their God was now shouting toward the incandescent interior, and he called them by their names, adding this time something he would never have said an hour earlier. He called them servants of the Most High God, and he ordered them to come out, and they came out. And now occurs the scene that closes the circle of that detail I asked you to keep in memory, the one about the clothing. The governors, the magistrates, the counselors, all the important men of the empire crowded around the three young men to examine them up close, incredulous. And the account makes an almost forensic inventory of everything they did not find. The fire had had no power over their bodies. Not a single hair of their heads had been singed. Their mantles were intact, as if just put on that same morning. And, the most incredible detail of all, they did not even smell of smoke. Think about it for a moment. Anyone who gets just a little close to a simple bonfire comes out smelling of burning for hours. With their clothes impregnated, these three men had been inside a maximally overheated forge, and they came out smelling exactly the same as when they went in. The same heat that melted armed and strong soldiers left on them, not a mark, not a trace, not a smell. As if the fire had simply decided not to recognize them, to pretend they were not there. The king reacted as what he was, a dramatic man of absolute extremes. He blessed aloud the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego before everyone. He acknowledged that that God had sent his messenger to deliver his servants. Servants who, said Nebuchadnezzar himself with admiration, had handed over their bodies rather than serve or worship another god. And then he promulgated a ferocious decree, as ferocious as the previous one, forbidding under penalty of death anyone, of any people or tongue, from speaking ill of the God of those men. And to top it off, he promoted them even higher in the administration of the province of Babylon. A happy ending, it would seem. Except that here we must be honest once more, because it's very tempting to turn this into a nice conversion story, and it simply isn't one. Nebuchadnezzar did not become a believer in the God of Israel that day. What he felt was astonishment. It was sacred terror before a power that had overwhelmingly surpassed him in public. His decree is not born of faith, it's born of fear and of respect for a force that proved to be greater than his own. And we know this with certainty, because the next chapter of the book shows us this very king swollen again with pride, strolling through his palace and boasting aloud of the greatness that he, with his own power, had built, until a new blow from heaven humbles him and leaves him for a long time out of his mind, living like a beast. The recognition on the plain of Dura was real, yes, but it was the recognition of a man dazzled by a spectacle, not that of a heart truly surrendered. To see a miracle and tremble is not the same as to trust and surrender, and this king is the living and somewhat tragic proof of that enormous difference. And here it's worth pausing, because there's an immense contrast hidden in this whole chapter, and it is, deep down, the true message of the account. On one side, you have a king who saw absolutely everything with his own eyes: the fire, the 4 men walking, the burned ropes, the complete miracle displayed before him. And even so, his faith evaporated like dew the moment the fright passed. On the other side, you have 3 young men who saw nothing in advance, who walked toward the fire completely blind, with no proof at all, and whose faithfulness turned out to be unbreakable as iron. The one who saw the miracle forgot it soon. Those who had no guarantee of a miracle never bent. The strongest faith in this whole chapter is not the one born of seeing with the eyes. It's the one that decided firm in the darkness before seeing absolutely anything. And that brings us, at the end of the road, back to the question of the beginning. Why did Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego not burn? The easy answer, the usual one, is because God did a miracle. And it's true. But that answer falls short, because it doesn't explain the most important thing: why they ended up in the fire in the first place. The complete answer is more uncomfortable and at the same time infinitely more beautiful. They did not burn because, long before the fire blazed on the plain, they had already burned inside in another way. They had already burned away within themselves all conditional faith, all calculation of convenience, all "I serve you as long as it suits me." When they pronounced "We hen la," but if not, they burned their own ropes long before the king's fire even touched them. They were free inside before they were free outside. And to a man who is already free inside, what can a flame do to him? And that's why, precisely for that reason, the 4th man appeared, not to reward those who came with a signed and reviewed insurance policy, but to accompany those who dared to enter the darkest place with none. Those 3 young men had had their names changed. They had been called by the names of foreign gods for years in an attempt to erase the Most High from their lips and from their identity. But that afternoon, at the mouth of the furnace, before an entire empire prostrate in the dust, the God they had tried to tear out of their names pronounced in letters of fire who they really were. And in the midst of the flames, in the exact place where there should have been 3 piles of ash, there were 4 silhouettes walking slowly, with not the slightest hurry, like someone strolling in the cool of the evening through the garden of his own house. Before you close the video, one last thing. Here on the screen, I've left you another of those videos that take a passage you think you know by heart and uncover the depth almost no one dares to tell. If this story stirred something inside you, that one will too. See you on the other side.